Today's date is Sunday. What does it say? It's Sunday. It's Saturday. Today's date is Saturday, September 14, 2024. The current local time is 11:50 a.m. EDT, unfortunately. But we are going to dive in and brush it all off. Welcome to the first day of our Professional Astrologers Diploma program. As you can hear, my voice is completely not present with us. And so hopefully it comes back over the course of the weekend. But, we'll do with what we have. Right. So we're not going to do a formal introduction right now. So if you want to just let us know down below in the chat box where you're logging in from, just so that we can have a sense of how broad range we are right now, because I know that there are several time zones. And to the best of my ability, I always try to make sure that we do this class at midday Eastern time, because it tends to be convenient for people on the East Coast, the West Coast, and in Europe. And then there are people in Australia like Joe. And so it's not so convenient, the timing of the class. And so those of you who are in time zones that really, really make it tricky for you to join live, I'm going to, when we're done with this weekend, I'm going to meet with you later on in the week to see what we can do to make this a more convenient situation for you. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen right now, because that is how a lot of our interaction goes, and you'll quickly get the hang of what's going on. So this course is called Foundation of Classical Astrology. It should also technically be called Mastering Traditional Astrology, which is the name of my book, Mastering Traditional Astrology. But it's still Foundations of Classical Astrology. And this is our autumn semester 2024. Now, the very first thing that we do in this class is I call this class the Great Equalizer, because this class essentially brings all of us to the same level playing field as far as things that we need to know in terms of traditional astrology. And a lot of people study traditional astrology, and many people have studied traditional astrology for a long time. But astrology as it isn't a homogeneous field. So you could study traditional astrology for 10 years, and I could study it for 10 years as well. And the two of us leave with two completely different bodies of information. So I created this course as a means of flattening that divide that oftentimes exists within the traditional astrology realm, to make sure that everything that you need to function within any sphere of traditional astrology is provided to you here. So the very first thing that is important to know is, if we're practicing astrology, we have to define astrology. So the first thing is, what is astrology? Now you all can put some suggestions or some thoughts in the chat box once again, because I'm going to be asking these questions. You can put thoughts or suggestions in the chat box, and I'll type on the screen my understanding of what this word is, essentially. So, as we know, astrology comes from two words: astro, which means the stars, and logos, which means knowledge. So astrology is essentially star knowledge. If we were to break it down to its most basic meaning, star knowledge, or the lore of the stars, or the wisdom of the stars. But one of the working definitions I've been using for astrology for the last, 4 years or so, is that astrology is the study of the correlation between cosmic relationships and concrete events. And this is actually a more watered down version of what I usually think, but essentially this is the crux of what we do. Astrology is the study of the correlation between cosmic relationships and concrete events, or between cosmic events and concrete events. This is our understanding of astrology, that within the philosophy of astrology, there is this knowledge or this notion that whatever is occurring within the cosmos is also going to be reflective of what's occurring on Earth. And that is all it is at its most basic level. Astrology is the study of the correlation between the cosmos and events that occur within our material world. So astrology is the study of the correlations between events that occur in the cosmos and how they are reflected within our material world. We practice a system of reflection. The idea that we base everything on is that if there is something that occurs within our material plane, whether mundanely for a large group of people or individually for us as individuals, then there is something that is being triggered within our own cosmic makeup that's causing those events to occur. So I said a while ago, mundanely. This word mundane refers to events that occur within our world or a large body of people. And the study of astrology that studies events that occur within our world for a large body of people is called mundane astrology, or the study of world events. So, when we talk about mundane astrology, or when we talk about astrology in general, we're referring to one system. And this is what that system does within all of its branches. It's the study of the correlation between events that occur within the cosmos and how they are reflected within our material world. But within that, there are several branches. So there are 4 main branches of traditional Western tropical astrology. As astrologers in any course, it's important for us to know the type of astrology that we're practicing. And so, here at Oraculos, and I dare say for most astrology schools based in the West, we tend to practice traditional Western tropical astrology, which is very different from traditional Western sidereal astrology, which is very different from Western modern tropical astrology, which is very different from modern Western sidereal astrology. So there are all types of variations on this theme of what Western astrology actually is. But we practice traditional Western tropical astrology. So before we dive into the 4 main branches of how that's divided, let's talk about what these words mean, traditional Western tropical astrology. So, traditional refers to a lineage of astrology that extends back towards the Egyptian period of astrology through the Hellenistic period, through the medieval period, through the Renaissance period. So when we tend to talk about traditional astrology in the West, this is kind of our lineage. We have this idea that astrology passed from the hands of the Babylonians to the Egyptians, from the Egyptians to the Greeks. From the Greeks, we go into this period of Christendom, and we could actually say to the Greeks and the Romans. So this would be Greco-Roman. And with the rise of Christendom, the burgeoning Christians thought that anything that they couldn't find within the exact teachings of Jesus must have been paganism, must have been blasphemy, must have been evil. So within the early period of Christianity, there was a squashing out of all of this Babylonian, Egyptian, Greco-Roman wisdom. And as a result of that, the Western world went into what are known as the Dark Ages. But in the process of the early Christian church squashing out the Babylonian, Egyptian, and the Greco-Roman wisdom, the Arabs picked that knowledge up. And so what is called the Dark Ages for the West is called the Golden Age. Is called the Golden Age within Arabic cultures. So when we speak about medieval astrology, to a very large degree, medieval astrology, to a very large degree, we're referring to astrology that is heavily based within the works of Arabic astrologers. So we can call this the Golden Age of Arabic science in general, of which astrology was a part. So what the Babylonians had was passed to the Egyptians. What the Egyptians had was passed to the Greeks and the Romans, particularly within the conquering of all of the known world by Alexander the Great. Everything became a melting pot. And then with the rise of Christianity, we have the Western world going into the Dark Ages, which corresponds with the Golden Age of the Arabs. And that is where medieval astrology really settled for hundreds of years, essentially, basically from the year 900 straight up to the end of the 12th century. So that's our idea of medieval astrology. And then from there, we have what is known as Renaissance astrology, which is where I've rooted a lot of my which is where I've rooted a lot of my practice over the years. But I think I also have to clarify what that means when I say that I practice Renaissance astrology. But after the Renaissance period, we went into what is now known as the pre-modern period of astrology before the 1900s, where the astrology still basically looked the same. Because all of the astrology continued to look the same from the 1700s straight up until the early 1900s. And then in the 1920s, it started to get fuzzy around the edges. And we're in the predicament that we're in today. But when we refer to traditional astrology, we're referring to a tradition of astrology that extends through this lineage. And at the very minimum, we're referring to a tradition of astrology that covers this lineage or that covers this period. Because all of the astrology from the Greco-Roman period to the medieval period to the Renaissance period tends to have the same core elements. And in different periods of time, people added their different flavors and their different seasonings based on the culture that it was passing through. But within our tradition of astrology, from the Greco-Roman period through the medieval period to the Renaissance period, the astrology pretty much looked the same. The astrology pretty much looked the same. What did it look like? It looked like, is Marlena here? Marlena Chan Fernandez? Marlena?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Raise your virtual hand. Okay, I see you, Marlena. Marlena, okay. I'm going to make you a co-host.
Okay.
And then I'm also going to do what? I'm also going to share this document with everybody who's here right now. So I'm going to copy the link and share document. And 1 second. Only people with access, no restricted, anyone with the link. So here we go. Done. So everybody, I'm going to put this in the chat. Okay. So there you go. That is the chat. And so you could all join. I see all of the funky animals joining. What is that one? It's an Ifrit. I don't even know what an Ifrit is, but there it is. And I'm also going to make Marlena. Marlena, your email is what? Here we go. I'm going to make you an editor, Marlena. So you can help me out with my multiple typos. So the astrology pretty much looked the same. So what did that look like? That looked like a universe in which we had three qualities. The three qualities are the qualities of sulfur, mercury, and salt, which are also the three prime substances of traditional alchemy, traditional Western alchemy: sulfur, mercury, and salt. So our astrology has these three qualities. Our astrology has three substances three substances, four qualities. The four qualities in traditional astrology are hot and cold, which are known as agents, and wet and dry, which are known as patients. Agents are thought to be active forces. Patients are thought to be passive forces. So everything within traditional astrology has three substances: sulfur, mercury, salt. Four qualities: hot, cold, wet, dry. These four qualities are then divided into the four elements. The four elements are the foundational building blocks of the universe. The foundational building blocks of the universe. Says who? Says everybody since the dawn of time. But in particular, says the pre-Socratic philosophers. In my book, Mastering Traditional Astrology, let me just stop the share for 1 second. I'm sorry, I can only imagine that it's very gritting on your consciousness to hear me speaking with my half of a voice right now, but I'm bringing you the best I have, and hopefully it changes tomorrow or something. It's been a miserable week. But in Mastering Traditional Astrology, if you go to chapter 3 on Hermetic Philosophy of the Pre-Cosmos, so that's page 58, chapter 3, Hermetic Philosophy of the Pre-Cosmos, that is where we dive into all of these things, the three substances, the four qualities, all of the things. And on page 59, I talk about the pre-Socratic philosophers. And essentially, the pre-Socratic philosophers are known as the fathers of philosophy. I will, Lisa. I will. Instead, I've been living in my 12th house and eating cheese all day because I have a cheese addiction. You know, some people are addicted to like drugs. I'm addicted to cheese, even though cheese is kind of a drug. There's been science, like research on it. But anyway, so the fathers of philosophy essentially all had the same question. What is the root substance out of which the entire universe arose, basically? And different people said different things. Thales was the first one, who was also an astrologer, by the way. People don't know Thales was an astrologer, but Thales was an astrologer. There's actually a story about Thales that says that he was looking up in the sky one night because he was looking at a particular planetary configuration, because back in the day, there was no light pollution, there were no airplanes, there were no satellites. So he was looking up in the sky thousands and thousands of years ago because he was looking at a particular planetary configuration. And in the process of looking up, he fell into a well because he wasn't watching where he was going. So he fell into the well. And so this little slave girl said to him, "Ha, ha, ha, you men of science, you're so concerned with what's going on in the sky that you're not even aware of what's going on around you." So Thales had an ego, because egos have been around since the dawn of time. So what Thales decided to do to prove this little slave girl wrong was he waited for the next planetary configuration that meant that there would be a high olive harvest. And when everybody else wasn't using the machines to harvest the olives, Thales purchased all of the olive harvesting machines, all of the plows and all of the scythes and all of the everything. And so when it was olive season, everybody had to come to Thales to use Thales' property. And Thales became dirty, stinking rich because he used astrology to make him some shmoney. So when in doubt, be like Thales. Wait for the correct moment and then seize the day. All of the fathers of philosophy were actually astrologers as well. And I love that story because that story tells us about how even from the founding of what we consider to be Western thought, the founding of Western thought, the father of the founding of Western thought was an astrologer. And there are countless stories of Thales helping to lead the army of his day using astrology, and of the philosophers who came after him also using astrology for their own purposes. But foundational to all of them was that all of them wanted to know, what is the root substance out of which the universe arose. And all of them started with these same 4 elements. And the 4 elements are fire. Let's do these in order: fire, air, water, and earth. This organization of the elements is the organization of the elements based on Plato. And this is also the organization of the elements that we find in Aristotle's work as well. This organization of the elements starting from fire and ending in earth. There's a wonderful painting by a French painter by the name of Oronce Finet, Crémant Mobile. And in this painting, well, none of these, right? Hold on, where is it? And in this painting, well, this is kind of like a close-up of the inside of it. So I guess we could use this. No, not that one. Where is it? This one. It's taking a while to load. But essentially, in this painting, which is taking forever to load, so let's look at, videos. Okay, in this painting, we see the organization of the elements. And so the ancients thought that fire was the utmost or the highest of the elements, followed by the air, which separated the sky from the earth, followed by the water that was on the earth, followed by the earth as the lowest element. So this painting that we see by Oronce Finet in 1549 is essentially an expression of this Platonic structure of our material plane, that fire was the highest element, followed by the air that separated the fiery heavens above from the earth below, water on the body of the earth, and then the earth below. So these are the 4 elements: fire, air, water, earth, which is very different from the organization of the elements that we have within astrology, because we know that astrologically speaking, the elements are organized based on the signs of the zodiac, where we would have fire first, followed by the earth, followed by the air, followed by the water. And so we'll talk about that. So fire, air, water, and earth. These 4 qualities are thought to be the foundational building blocks of these 4 elements. So within fire, we find the coming together of hot and dry. Within air, we find the coming together of hot and moist. Thank you, Marlena. Marlena, it's very good to have you back in class. Within water, we find the coming together of cold and moist. And within the earth element, we find the coming together of cold and dry. So that's how these 4 qualities became distilled into the foundation or the making of these 4 elements. Now, we know that there's this Hermetic axiom, which is oftentimes attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, but I don't really believe that this specific axiom is found in the Corpus Hermeticum. I think it's found on the Emerald Tablet. And we know that that axiom is as above, so below. As above, so below. So there's this idea that if these elements exist in nature, they must also exist within us. And so this gave birth to the foundation of Western medicine. And Western medicine was founded on this notion of the 4 humors. Not humor as in ha ha ha, but humor as in the 4 substances, the 4 vital substances that maintain and sustain life within the human organism. These 4 humors correspond with the 4 elements in the following way. We have, I'm still adding people, we have fire, which we know is hot and dry, and it corresponds with what is known as red or yellow. It depends on, which source you're reading. Red or yellow bile. Red or yellow bile. Now, as all of you know, I think at this point, maybe you know, I have recently I'm a part of this whole human dissection study project situation, and I fly out every couple months to go and take this human dissection course. And as a part of my continued medical astrology research and studies, and it's a fascinating thing. And in in the human dissection course I was just at, I was responsible for eviscerating the body. Evisceration, I thought it was just a word from the Powerpuff Girls when you get zapped by a laser and they say, "Oh, you're eviscerated." But no, it's not a Powerpuff Girls word. Evisceration means when you remove the organs from a body. So I was responsible for removing all of his viscera, essentially. And I removed his liver, and underneath the liver is an accessory sac, and it's called your gallbladder, because that's where the excess bile goes. Now, what bile does is not what it's supposed to, but bile helps to break down fat within our food so that we could digest it better. So the ancients thought that bile had this corrosive quality, had this burning quality, which is why when you read traditional texts about angry people, they are known as bilious people. If somebody is bilious, that means that that person is very angry and very violent and very harsh. This word bilious, or when you say that somebody has a lot of gall, that means that person's burning up inside. That's what those words mean. And because those words are coming from a time in astrology where we use those words to describe the humors within a person. So if somebody went and called a doctor back in the 17th century, the doctor might say, this person is suffering from excess of bile, or this person is suffering from a bilious condition. They should go eat some watermelon or eat some cantaloupe or eat something to bring down some of that bilious fire. This is what that bile is representing, okay? So coming over here, so we have fire, hot and dry, which is corresponding with red or yellow bile in the body. That's the humor, right? Let's put the word humor so that we know that. And it has a U. It has a U. So if you write HUMOR, that's something else. But if you're talking about the humors that sustain life, it has a U. So fire. Next up, we have air, which is hot and wet. And this corresponds with the humor of blood. This corresponds with the humor of blood. The ancients thought that air was the best element because they thought that the combinations of hot and wet were the best combinations that could possibly exist. Hot and wet was the best, which means that air is the best, which means that of the 12 signs of the Zodiac, the ancients thought that Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius were the best because there is something foundationally life supportive of this coming together of heat and moisture. Our blood is hot and wet, our bodies are hot and wet, the food we eat are hot and wet, the activities we enjoy participating in late at night, you get the drift. It's all hot and wet. That probably went over some of your heads. Maybe it didn't. Maybe if you're in a relationship, you know what I'm talking about. But heat and moisture are foundational to things that we associate with pleasure and things we like doing. So air, hot and wet, we love that combination. That corresponds with the humor of blood. Now, the next humor is going to correspond with water. And water is corresponding with cold and wet. And that's going to correspond with the humor of phlegm. I like saying phlegm. It's actually phlegm, but phlegm, which I'm full of at the moment, which is why I sound like somebody's pet turtle, because I'm full of phlegm, I'm full of phlegm. So phlegm corresponds with the water element, and it's cold and wet. Now, you might say, well, hell, I don't have phlegm all over my body, but you actually do have phlegm all over your body because the inner lining of your viscera, a lot of the viscera within us, whether it's our stomach or the entire GI tract, from the esophagus all the way down, there are these goblet cells that are secreting mucus, basically, which is why when you hack a loogie from the back of your throat, there's always loogie to be hacked. Because within you, there's always phlegm. because that phlegm is meant to serve as a protective boundary between your soft tissue and the things that go in it in the form of food and all of that stuff. Also, this idea of phlegm, when the ancients say that phlegm is one of the vital substances of the body, we have to go beyond this thought of just snot, and we have to think about all of the things within us that serves as a protective cushioning. So for the ancients, that phlegm is also corresponding with the cartilage between our bones that prevent us from having bone rubbing against bone. That phlegm is also corresponding with the discs between our vertebral column of our spine, which is also once again preventing bone rubbing against bone. That phlegm is corresponding with the synovial fluid that lubricates our joints. Anything that allows us to have some cushioning or some level of safety or protection is going to correspond with phlegm. Over your stomach, over your organs in your abdomen is a huge sheet of fat, and it's called the greater omentum. And that's supposed to protect your organs so that if you were to drop on your stomach or drop flat down on your organs, you don't rupture your organs. That is also phlegm. And truthfully speaking, this idea of phlegm is really, really amazing. I find it amazing because I, geek out about this stuff. I'm going to show you something. I'm going to wait for it to load up on the screen. But there is so much within our bodies that corresponds with phlegm. Whether it's fat, whether it's cartilage, whether it's synovial fluid, there is so much that corresponds with this humor, that corresponds with, that corresponds with water, that's unbelievable, truthfully. So I'm going to let that load up and we're going to come back to the working document because I want you to see this for yourself, to see that we're just all full of snot, basically, because it serves this huge protective function. Now, finally, after phlegm, after water, we have earth. This is my favorite thing in the world. Earth is cold and dry, says the ancients. And the humor that this corresponds with is black bile. Now, for hundreds and hundreds of years, nobody knew what the ancients meant by black bile. And I like to believe that I'm the one who figured it out. However, who knows, maybe somebody else did it. But I want you all to go for it. Tell me in the chat box, not those of you who know. If you've already taken this course before, don't say anything. Not those of you who already know. But tell me in the chat box, what do you think black bile is? Becky, don't say it. If you've read my book, if you've taken this course, don't say it. What do you think black bile is? Okay, I'm going to give you I'm going to give you 30 seconds to cook, and then I'm going to check in the chat box to see what you're saying because it's fascinating and it's delicious and I love it. Okay. All right, now let me check the chat and see what you all have said. Scrolling down. Yes, exactly. Well, good guess. No, it's shit. Black bile is shit. That's what it is. It's feces. It's all human waste products is black bile. I want to bring you over here for a second because I want to show you something that I think you'll find to be quite fascinating on this note of phlegm within the body. This is Visible Body. This is a program that we used when I was doing pre-med, and it's a program that I like to show people. So when we think about phlegm as a protective covering, this is a protective covering over our organs. That's called that's called the parietal peritoneum. And that's supposed to make sure that when you drop on your abdomen, you don't die because of internal hemorrhaging. So we're going to hide that. But guess what? Underneath that is more phlegm-based substance, fat. All of that fat is called your greater omentum, which is also supposed to serve the purpose of protection. And this is also corresponding with phlegm and the water element. We move that, and guess what? There's more protection. Now we're down to the visceral peritoneum, and that's also for the covering our organs. So when we move all of that, now we have the soft tissue of the organs within us. And I think that that is really, really fascinating to show how many layers of protection there are to make sure that we don't die. And all of those layers of protection are corresponding with phlegm. Okay? So black bile is feces. How can I do this? It's feces. Feces. Human waste. And that human waste could look like anything. That human waste could look like urine, feces, sweat. Any waste byproduct of the body is going to correspond with that black bile. So this is how we have this idea of as above, so below playing out within our human experience, isn't it? For the ancients, these were the building blocks of human life. And if there was an excess or whatever the opposite of excess is, if there was an excess or a regress or whatever, if there were a surplus or a diminishment of any of these within our systems, then we fell out of homeostasis, or we fell out of our natural harmony that sustained life. So the ancients further went on to describe what are issues or diseases that people have when there is an excess of red bile. What are issues that people have when there's an excess of blood? What are issues that people have when there's an excess of phlegm? What are issues that people have when there's an excess of black bile? Now, speaking about this idea of excesses, all of these, if we have, let me do this here. If we have correspondences within our physical body between the cosmos and ourselves, then we must also find these same correspondences within our non-physical constitution. Within our non-physical constitution. And this goes down into what are known as the divisions of the soul. The divisions of the soul from a traditional astrological perspective. Now, truthfully, when we later on within the, I think probably next weekend, we're going to go into this idea of, well, actually, we don't even have to wait until next weekend. The ancients considered us to all be elementata. So, the ancients considered us to all be elementata. Elementata, which is going to be the name of my first child if I ever have one. Elementata. Another name I was going to name my first child if I ever had one was glucagon. Another name was going to be fibrinogen. But elementata is going to be the name of my first son/daughter. And what about it? Elementata means elemental being. The ancients considered us all to be elemental beings. Meaning that we are beings made of the elements. And the reason why all of this is important is because for the ancients, everything within our material world was made of the elements. The planets were made up of a fifth something called the quintessence or the quint element. And as a result of that, the planets were thought to be perfect. The planets were thought to be perfect spiritual beings, and the planets were the closest expression of God that our eyes could see in our entire cosmos. The planets were as close to perfection and to the immortal light of God as could possibly exist. And therefore, the planets were not corruptible within themselves. But everything made up of the elements were thought to be corruptible. And so we find in the work of Claudius Ptolemy that the planets, through their whirling motion, causes changes within our elemental constitution. So if you think about it, it's like the planets are the top of I don't know, you have a cup of water and then there's dirt at the bottom, which is something I think, Paul, this is something we learned in our Reiki class with our Java. But you have dirt at the bottom and then there's water in the vessel. And then you start to stir up the water and it causes the dirt at the bottom to also get stirred up. So we as elemental beings, we're the dirt at the bottom of the cosmos. You know? And when the planets stir their stirrings, it causes changes within our constitution. And that is the premise of astrology. The astrology works because there is something within all of us that is responsive to the whirling motion of the planets. Isn't that cool? It's really, really, really cool if you think about it for 2 seconds. Maybe you need to eat a mushroom for it to really hit you in the right way, but it's actually fabulous. Okay, so let's come back over here. And so if we have so the ancients considered us all to be elementata or elemental beings. There's a very auspicious number of us in this room right now because there's 64 of us. And 64 is a number of great cosmic importance, both from the perspective of the I Ching as well as from the perspective of astrology, because 64 is the smallest hard aspect that exists within astrology. So I feel very blessed and fortunate. It's a good day. So elemental beings, we are beings made up of the elements, right? So if we have correspondences within our physical body between the cosmos and ourselves, then we must also find these same correspondences within our non-physical constitution. Now, let me tell you all something. How many pages into this document are we? We're 2 pages into the document. By the end of class, we'll probably be 5 pages into the document. Someone asked the other day how I teach. This weekend is not going to be the normal thing because, well, I guess it probably is the normal thing. If this weren't open house, there'd be a lot more back and forth between us, a lot more you unmuting, me calling on you, whatever. But because this is an open house and I'm, trying to get you all to drink the Oraculos Kool-Aid and potentially study with us, it's not going to be that normal situation. But week by week, my only expectation is that you study what I taught the week before. So I think that that's a very fair thing. Day 1, I have no expectation of anybody to know anything. Day 2, I don't have any expectation of anybody to know anything. But there's a whole week. There's an intermission of a week between classes. All I expect for you to know next week is what was taught this week. Then in the 3rd week, all I expect for you to know in the 3rd week is what was taught in the previous 2 weeks. And that is how we grow our tree of wisdom at Oraculos, not by me giving you homework to do. We're all grown adults. This isn't pedagogy. This is andragogy. Pedagogy is the study of teaching children. Andragogy is the study of teaching adults. We're all adults. We all have responsibilities. We all have things to do in life. You're not going to be here 24/7, and you probably don't have no time to do no homework. So there is no homework. But please, during the week, give yourself opportunity to rewatch the recording at least one time, perhaps, and read over the working document. Also, what I'll say to you is not in the beginning, but when I used to go to Shampoo Banana, which is what the people from Chicago call Champagne Urbana, because the Chicago people think they're better than everybody. But I used to go to Shampoo Banana to study yoga with my teacher, Lois Steinberg. I would record the class on my cell phone. This is my nephew, by the way. Where is he? That's my nephew. Do you see him? That's drool coming out of his mouth. It's amazing. I love him so much. Anyway, so I would record everything on my cell phone. Every class that I ever took with Lois, I would record on my cell phone. And while I'm driving, I would listen to the class. While I'm in the food store, I would listen to the class so that I'm always in the vortex of that information. And then in the end, people are like, wow, Mychal, you know so much of what Lois teaches. I know so much because I'm always in the vortex of Lois's teachings. Nowadays, I don't do that anymore. But the point is, you could also record the class on your cell phone and then just listen to it while you're walking the dog, listen to it while you're doing whatever, so that it doesn't feel like a forced extra step for you to have to listen to the recording during the week, So that's just some tips for you that have been helpful to me within my incarnation. Okay. So if we have correspondences within our physical body between the cosmos and ourselves, then we must also find these same correspondences within our non-physical constitution. So the ancients said that these same elements, fire, air, water, and earth, were corresponding, as we know, hot and dry. Thank you, Marlena. Fire is hot and dry. It corresponds with the humor of red or yellow bile. And it also corresponds with the temperament of, with the choleric temper. Now, I made not a mistake, but I made an omission earlier because red or yellow bile is also called choler. Red or yellow bile is also called choler. Okay? So, fire, hot and dry, humor, red or yellow bile, corresponds with choler. So the temperament is choleric. Some people say choleric. It doesn't matter to me what you say. You just have to know it. The temperament is choleric. Then we go on to, well, before that, let me explain what this word temperament means. Temperament refers to our psychological constitution based on our physiological constitution as seen through the lens of humoral theory. So temperament refers to who we are psychologically based on our physiological constitution as seen through the lens of humoral theory. Pardon me. This idea of red, yellow bile, black bile, blood, and phlegm is humoral theory. This idea that there are four vital substances that maintain human life is called humoral theory. And the branch of ancient medicine that dealt with putting us back together again, based on the balance between our humors, is called humoral medicine. Well, you could call it humoral medicine, basically. But it's still practiced. Humoral medicine is still practiced in certain Arabic countries under the name Unani. I'm probably going to get this wrong. Unani Tim. It might also be Unani Tim. But let's see over. Unani Tib, pardon me. Let's take a look at it. Unani medicine. Unani medicine, a traditional system of healing and health maintenance observed in South Asia. The origin of Unani medicine are found in the doctrines of ancient Greek physicians, Hippocrates and Galen. As a field, it was later developed by the Arabs, Ibn Sina, during the Caliphate, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, the point of the matter is that's what it's called. It's called Unani Tip. And see, it's talking about temperament. Look. These principles include arkan, or the elements, mizaj, or temperament, aklat, or bodily humors, aza, or organs and systems, arwa, or vital system. Okay, cool. Okay, fine. So basically, it's astrology because everything that we're talking about is what we find here. So bodily humors, I just spoke to you about. Now we're talking about the temperament, and we also spoke about how that's based on the elements. So Unani Tib. Thank you very much, Marlena. I think that when you say it, though, it sounds like Unani Tib, and it kind of has like an MB, whatever. Right. So the temperament would be choleric. Then we have air, which is hot and wet, which corresponds with the humor of blood, and it corresponds with the temperament of sanguine. Sanguine sounds like penguin, a penguin who sang. Sanguine. Now, after that, And sanguine is considered to be the best humor, or rather the best temperament. We love sanguine people. Sanguine people get along with everybody. Now, water is, as we know, cold and wet. It corresponds, ideals. It corresponds with the humor. What is that humor called? Phlegm. Phlegm. I just think it's a funny word, phlegm. It corresponds with the temperament. What's the temperament? Corresponds with the temperament phlegmatic. You know, my father was born on July 23rd. And I feel like internally, people just have such a distaste for the thought of being considered phlegmatic because, it's like, oh, you're full of snot. And so he was born July 23rd. And for the life of him, if you tell him that he's a Cancer, that he has a sun in Cancer and not Leo, he will be so upset with you because he doesn't want to be a crab. Why? Because the crabs are water signs and they're full of snot. They're phlegmatic. So he doesn't want to be a snotty crab. So you have to call him a flaming Leo because that's the only way that he'll respond to you. So phlegmatic is the temperament. And then finally, for Earth, what is the Earth? Earth is cold and dry. It has the humor of, what's the humor? Black bile, which as you know is feces. Black bile. And the temperament of, now, I like this a lot. It's like, wow. The temperament, in very few classical sources, we see it called melancholer. In very few, but very, very few. You really can't see it anywhere. I can't even pull to my mind where exactly you have to go to see it. Very, very few. Melancholer. However, what in most sources is melancholy. Now, there's an angel whose name is Melancholia. Melancholia. And let's go and look. Let's go and look for the angel Melancholia. Melancholia. I shit you not. I only tell you the truth. And then, of course, there's Kristen Dunst. But there's also an angel. Okay, maybe I need to type in. Okay, no, see? No, Kristen. Okay, the angel Melancholia. Every time I teach this course, I'm so happy. Like I probably downloaded this picture 20 times in the last 10 years. But it's such a striking picture because as you look at it, you automatically, if it will only load, I don't know why this is it. Visible body makes everything run slower. So I have to shut down visible body and let's open up the angel Melancholia. It's really, really, really a great picture. There we go. So look at that. That's her name in the background. Melancholia. And everything about the picture looks cold and dry and heavy and dense. Like constipation. The angel looks constipated. The baby looks constipated. The dog looks starving but still constipated. Everything looks so heavy. Look at the time falling down over the angel's head to show her that even though she's immortal, she still has her days numbered. It's such a heavy, dense picture. Look at the grinding wheel, the grindstone that represents the work that we have to do within this lifetime. Look at all of the tools and the implements of labor. Why couldn't they put an elevator here? Why couldn't they put an escalator there? Why? Maybe because it was the 1500s, but also because that ladder is meant to show this slow climbing up that we have to do in life? Oh my God. Oh, I just feel bloated just looking at it. So that's the angel melancholia. So sometimes, there's a lot of these revival shows. There's the Serpent Queen that's now on Hulu. And then I think there's another show about the Empress or something that's on something else. And or Catherine, Queen Catherine or Empress Catherine or whatever. And sometimes in these old shows, they say they have like a doctor scene, and in the doctor scene it says, "Oh, this patient is suffering from melancholy, from a lot of melancholy." That's one of the things we hear because that was actually a diagnosis. There's also a book called The Anatomy of Melancholy, which I've never read before, but I've downloaded it. I really want to read it. Anatomy of Melancholy. It was written in, it's also like a very old book as well. It's written in 1621. Oh, Lord, Wikipedia. Bless your heart. So the anatomy of melancholy, what it is with all kinds, causes, symptoms, prognostics, and several cures of it. The anatomy of, wow, look at that. On this book talking about anatomy of melancholy, what do we see? We see astrological symbols. That's Mercury. That's the opposition. That's Saturn. Look at this. Moon conjunct Saturn brings melancholy. Of course it does. Look at that. That's Jupiter. That's the Sun. That's Mercury. I've never even seen this book cover, but why would this be on the book cover of a book written by a doctor? Probably because probably because doctors knew this stuff, Melancholy. Very interesting. Okay, where are we now? So, melancholia. So, what are we talking about? How do we even get here? We got here because we're talking about what is the same about traditional astrology. What does the tradition of astrology look like straight across the board? And we have these three substances, which we'll talk about when we start talking about the signs. The four qualities, the four elements. Now, notice here that every element has an agent and a patient, and the agent always comes first. So it is incorrect to say dry and hot. If you say dry and hot on an exam, if Oraculos gave those sorts of exams, it would be incorrect because fire is not dry and hot, fire is hot and dry. If you said moist and hot for air, you would be incorrect because saying moist and hot says that there's a fundamental piece missing within your knowledge bases. A lot of times, astrologers have all of the correct pieces, but they don't have the correct sequencing. For example, many, many, many times, I hear people who are professional astrologers say things like, in my birth chart, I have Mars conjunct my moon. Not one person on this planet has Mars conjunct their moon. In 5,000 years of astrological history, not one person was born with Mars conjunct their moon, because Mars is not conjunct your moon. Your moon is conjunct Mars. Moon conjunct Mars, not Mars conjunct the moon. And this language, you hear it from the top, the very top of the astrological food chain. Oh, in this person's chart, he had Saturn conjunct, he had Saturn squaring his sun. Not one person since the dawn of time has ever had Saturn square their sun, because the sun squares Saturn. Why? Because the faster moving planet is always the planet that's going to make the effect. The slower moving planet receives the effect. The sun squares Saturn. Saturn does not square the sun. You see? And then, of course, people go into the weeds about what if it's retrograde? What if it's that? What if it's whatever? We'll talk about all of that with due time. But the point is, you could have the best knowledge in the world, but your inability to organize that knowledge adequately makes you look crazy. And it makes you sound crazy when you go into the front of people to go and talk to people about your subject, especially if those people know your subject already. So my goal at Oraculos has always been to make sure that the Oraculos student can go in any astrological space and sit at any astrological table and sound like they know what they're talking about, because you will know what you're talking about. So all of these things are needing to be known from an every perspective, not just from an astrology perspective, but also from a larger perspective as far as Western mysticism is concerned. Now we're going to move on and talk about the planets. And we started with this because the whole point of this was to say that all traditional astrology in the West follows the same model. Every single system of traditional astrology, from the Greeks and the Romans to the medieval period to the Renaissance, follows this exact same model. Now we have the 7 planets. We're going to take a break at, it's currently 12:51. We're going to take a break in 9 minutes, just so that I could get the rest of this information out on the paper. And I'm also realizing that my laptop needs to charge. So let me just do that quickly. Cool. And we're going to take a break in 9 minutes because I know that this could be a lot of information all at once. So 7 planets. The 7 classical planets are organized in traditional astrology in what is known as the Chaldean order. Chaldea was one of the names that was given to a large portion of ancient Mesopotamia, and today a lot of people simply refer to ancient Babylon in general as Chaldea. So let us look up Chaldea. So Chaldea was a small country that existed between the late 10th or early 9th to mid 6th century, after which the country and its people were absorbed and assimilated into the indigenous population of Babylonian. So it was a small country that was eventually assimilated into Babylonia. Fine, but today a lot of people simply refer to ancient Babylon as Chaldea in general, and I'm not sure why that would be based on what we just read. So Chaldea was a small country that was assimilated into Babylonia. Okay, so the 7 planets in the Chaldean order are Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, Moon. 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 Now you say it. Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, Moon. Every astrologer should know the Chaldean order. Every astrologer should know the Chaldean order, truthfully speaking. Everything that is on this document, every astrologer should know. Why? Because everything on this document is the foundations of what we practice. And I swear to you that you people in this room are probably amongst the only people who know this information in this sort of way. And other people who know it have probably also been trained at Oraculos. And I'm not sure why that is, and I'm not sure where the disconnect is. I am sure what the disconnect is. The disconnect occurred when we started to think of astrology as its own subject, separate from the larger field of Western mysticism that gave birth to it. So all of these things that we're teaching about are things that exist within any body of Western mystical literature, but we seldom find astrologers having the scope or the range to be able to talk about it, because we talk about astrology as if it's its own thing, unless if it starts with the signs of the zodiac, and it doesn't. It absolutely positively doesn't. So every astrologer should know this information, and there will never be information that you know that will be useless. Okay, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, and the Moon. Now, let's talk about it. I just did that whole long planet series. I'm not going to redo in this what I would have done already in the planet series. For those of you signed up for the course, I'm going to put in your student portal, thank you, Marlena. I'm going to put in your student portal the unedited planetary lectures so that you could have that in your student portal. The rest of the world will have to wait the 1 or 2 months until we start publishing those. But for those of you who are signed up for this course, I'm going to put the whole unedited video in your student portal. People always ask, I haven't gotten my student portal yet. Of course, my darling heart, you haven't gotten your student portal yet because there's nothing inside it. There's nothing in it. If there was something in it, you would have it. There's nothing in your student portal. So as soon as I put something, you're welcome, Erica. As soon as I put something in your student portal, I'll give you the link. And I'll actually give you all the link after this weekend, okay? Those of you who are registered for the course, I'll give you the whole planetary series, including the one that we did a couple months ago, which was the introduction to the planet, so that you could have that there, because I don't want to teach again. I don't want to teach on top of I don't like to repeat myself, truthfully. So Saturn is, well, I'm going to repeat myself because I also don't like to half teach things. All of the planets derive their nature based on their proximity to the sun and the moon and the earth. All of the planets derive their nature based on their proximity to the sun, moon, and earth. Earth was a source of moisture. Moon, source of moisture. Sun, source of heat. So let's do it. Saturn is as far from the sun as possible, therefore Saturn is cold. Saturn is as far from the earth and the moon as possible, therefore Saturn is dry. Saturn is cold and dry. The sun is clearly hot and dry because the sun, there's nothing on the sun that's moist. The moon is clearly going to be wet because Ptolemy says to us the moon is wet, as can be seen through the ways in which she impacts the waters of the earth. So the moon is wet, according to Ptolemy. Venus is hot because, thank you very much, Marlena, thank you so much. Venus is hot as a result of her proximity to the sun. Mars is hot. Mars is double hot. Mars is hot because of Mars's proximity to the sun, but Mars is also hot as a result of the heat that he carries in his own nature, because when the ancients looked at Mars, they said Mars was red, like blood, and like warfare, and like things we like to be afraid of. In Mastering Traditional Astrology, page 159, I have this quote from Christopher Catan on page 159, and you could read it with me and follow with me. So if you don't have this book, Mastering Traditional Astrology, you definitely do need to have it. Paul, do you have this book? Do you have my book? Okay, wonderful. I'm going to also bring it up on the screen because, even though the book is a requirement for the course, I don't like to be that person who, ostracizes people because they don't have stuff. So I'm going to bring it up on the screen so that, thank you so much, Tony. I appreciate you getting it. Where are we? Well, I said page 159. So if it's page 159 in the book, that means it's going to be page 189 in the PDF. Voila! I've gotten very good at that. So Mars is called Mavors, which is as much to say as mighty in war, bloody, of high courage, and not to be subdued. valiant in arms, strong, furious, invincible, whom none can resist that would do him harm. He putteth down the mighty and taketh kings, emperors, and potentates out of their places. He is the Lord of heat and the governor of fire, a planet of blood, and encourageth and maketh hardy people in fight. Wow. Very intense. When I hear that, I think about the card, the Five of Wands, which has nothing to do with Mars, really, because the Five of Wands is a card that's associated with Saturn and Leo. The Five of Wands is Saturn and Leo. Let me see if I could find a better deck. Universal weight. There we go. You know, it sounds like a fighting card, right? Five of Wands. So anyway, yeah, Mars is hot and dry because that's what the fire element is. Sun is hot and dry, clearly. Now, the ancients said that Jupiter was hot because Jupiter was under the double burner. Let's do this like this, Marlena. Let's do this like this. Jupiter was under the double burner or above the double burner of Mars and the Sun. So therefore, Jupiter is naturally hot. But they said that heat passed through the body of Jupiter. So here we have the Sun, here we have Mars. They said that the heat passed through the body of Jupiter and into the cold ice body of Saturn. And as a result of that, it caused precipitation on the body of Saturn. And so the coldness of Saturn turned into dew, and that dew dropped droplets of moisture into Jupiter. Therefore, Jupiter is hot and moist. Very much like the parables of Jesus, these things aren't meant to be taken literally. Thank you, Marlena. These things are meant to be taken literally. Very much like mythology, these things aren't meant to be taken literally because these stories are a means of teaching a deeper cosmic truth. So please don't get stuck in the notion of, oh, well, if Saturn is as far from the Earth as possible and can't have any moisture, how is Saturn ice? Of course, Saturn is cold, but how would he be icy if there's no moisture? No, don't get stuck on that. Understand the concept of what's being said. So Saturn is cold and dry, Jupiter is hot and moist, Mars is hot and dry, Sun is hot and dry. Venus is hot because of her proximity to the Sun, but she's also moist because of her proximity to the Moon and the Earth. We have to imagine that underneath this Moon is going to be the Earth, yes? Finally, well, not finally, the Moon is considered to be wet because that is the primary function, that's the primary thing about her. But she's also considered to be hot and wet as a relationship to, or based on the relationship that she has with the Sun. We know that the Moon appropriates unto herself the heat of with the light of the Sun, and that's how we see the Moon going through her phases. So the Moon is thought to be hot and wet within the teachings of Claudius Ptolemy, which is very different from the teachings of the medieval astrologers who say that the Moon is cold and wet. We'll talk about that later. And then finally, Mercury, the most magical planet in all astrology, is thought to be wet because of his proximity to the Earth and the Moon, and dry because of his speed. And so Mercury is the only planet that has the ability to hold two contradicting forces within himself without being destroyed by the sheer impossibility of that contradiction, Mercury. So these are the natures of the planets. So therefore, if Saturn is cold and dry, we can imagine that Saturn is corresponding with black bile, corresponding with, let's say this, corresponding with the earth element, black bile, and what's that other thing? And the of melancholy temperament. Yeah, this is why Saturn is called the father of melancholy. What do we call melancholy in the 21st century? Depression. So Saturn is the father of depression, the father of melancholy, viz. Depression. Viz is a word that you will always see in traditional astrology texts or in any book that was written in the 1800s or prior. Viz. It is very important that you all know what viz means. I'm going to set up what is known as our Otsar Hamilim. Otsar Hamilim. Go for it, Marlena. Thank you. Otsar Hamilim means treasury of words. Otsar Hamilim, you could write that in brackets, Marlena. Otsar Hamilim means treasury of words in Hebrew. And it reminds me of this book that Aleister Crowley wrote, which is called A Treasure House of Images. Well, have you heard of that book, A Treasure House of Images by Crowley? It's a nice book. It's a book, it's basically poems about the Zodiac. He was a very poetic person. So A Treasure House of Images, you could download it online. Just download A Treasure House of Images. So this is a treasury of words. Aliester, A-L-I-E. Marlena, I love you. And I don't like square anythings. I don't like square brackets. Sorry. The problem is me. So a treasure house of, and he spelled it with, as in one word, treasure house. A treasure house of images. Anyway, it's a treasure house. And can we make that a one thing? Just delete it. A Treasure House of Images by Aleister Crowley. I think it's Easter. That's how I tell myself to remember it, but I think that looks wrong. Easter. Easter. It's a hard one. Easter. Pardon me. Thank you. Okay, so viz. Viz means in other words. Whenever you see the word viz in any sort of book written in the 1800s or prior, it means in other words. Why is that important? Because I just used it here. Saturn is the father of melancholy, viz, in other words, the father of depression. Saturn corresponds with the earth element, black bile, and the melancholy temperament. Jupiter corresponding with the air element, blood, and the sanguine. And the sanguine temperament. Thanks, Paulina. Mars corresponding with the fire element, red or yellow bile, and the choleric temperament. Sun corresponding with the fire element, red or yellow bile, and the choleric temperament. Venus corresponding with the air element, blood, and the sanguine temperament. Mercury corresponds with no element, no humor, and no temperament, which drove the Arabs nuts. It drove them to the point of making shit up. It drove them crazy. I've never seen a set of people be so bent out of shape by anything before in the history of history except for this. Mercury having no element, no gender, no humor, no sex, no nothing. It drove the Arabs up the wall. And, and I'll tell you what the result of that was. And the moon finally corresponding with the air element based on her qualitative combination of hot and wet. However, with the water element based on her nature in general, she's corresponding with the blood as a humor and the sanguine temperament, which also drove the Arabs nuts, truthfully. Because, I don't know why it's given the blue line. Yeah, change all of them to corresponds. The other two, the others above ones as well. So, yeah, it drove them crazy. Mercury drove them crazy and the moon drove them crazy. And Venus didn't do anything to nobody and she drove them crazy too. So, for the Arabic astrologers, we find them saying that Venus was cold and moist. Why? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. The Arabic astrologers say that Venus, medieval astrologers state that Venus is cold and moist. Medieval astrologers who couldn't understand Mercury having no element, no humor, and no temperament arbitrarily said that medieval astrologers who could not understand that Mercury has no temperament, has no element, no humor, and no temperament, said that Mercury is cold and dry, and therefore corresponds with the earth element, and therefore corresponds with the melancholy temperament. And therefore corresponds with black bile, and therefore corresponds with the melancholy temperament, none of which is even remotely similar to the nature of Mercury as we think about Mercury. It was completely arbitrary and completely made up and completely incorrect within the larger scheme of what astrology is. So that's Mercury. And then the medieval astrologers also bent out of shape about a hot and wet moon because they just couldn't fathom it, said that state that the moon is cold and wet. So I'm saying this because those of you who are studying with me, you know this. This is the information that you know to be true. However, you will go into other astrological spaces and they will tell you exactly Claudius Ptolemy. Claudius Ptolemy is who we're drawing these references from. You will go into other astrological spaces and they'll say, no, Venus is cold and whatever, cold and wet. And you have to have enough background to be able to support your stance and say, no, actually, within the context of the development of these thoughts philosophically and metaphysically, here's the reason why. Can you justify for me why you're saying Venus is cold and wet, other than by saying that somebody told me that? Because people say that, but they don't have a reason why. You will say Venus is hot and dry. You will say Venus is hot and moist, and you will have a reason why, because you would have studied the background of these ideas. Okay? Let's change moist to wet. All right, everybody. I think that we should take a 5-minute break. Let me just check the pulse of the land. Are we having a good time? Are we okay? Is everything okay? Wonderful. Are we learning things on day one? Are we learning lots and lots and lots and lots? Amazing. Amazing, amazing, amazing. Okay, great. So let's take a 5-minute break and then we'll come back and we'll wrap up for today, okay? All right, everyone. All right. So let's take a look at what has been and what we've done thus far. And let me just share my screen again. Okay, so we have 10 minutes left, and I am wondering whether or not I want to. I'm just wondering my level of satisfaction. Oh, we have to date this, Marlena. And actually, so hold on, let me put this here. What is today? Today is the 14th. Yeah. So the date is actually more important. So just put the date on the top, Marlena, and then the thing at the bottom. Yeah, let the date be on top of the foundations of classical astrology. Okay. So I feel pretty good. I feel pretty good about all of this, the 7 planets. We got down there and we stopped there. Oh, all of this really happened because I was trying to answer the question, or I made the statement, the astrology pretty much looked the same from this period to this period. And I was asking, what did it look like? And these are the elements of what it looked like. The 3 substances, the 4 qualities, the 4 elements, the 4 humors. I showed you how that broke down. The 4 temperaments, the 7 planets. Clearly, the next piece would be the 12 signs of the Zodiac, yes? Is that the next piece? Sure, let's do it. 12 signs of the Zodiac. So even here in this outlining of the model of how things began astrologically, we see that the signs of the Zodiac aren't actually high on the list. They're actually pretty low down. Right. We have Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Piscis, and Pisces. At Oraculos, we use the German system of notation. So if we're talking about Aries, we use ARI, Taurus, TAU, Gemini, GEM, Cancer, CAN, Leo, LEO, Virgo, VIR, Libra, LIB, Scorpio, SCO, Sagittarius, SAG, Capricorn, CAP. And here you see why we have to use 3 letters. Because if we only use 2 letters, then both Capricorn and Cancer would be CA. So we have to use 3 letters. Thank you, Marlena. CAP for Capricorn, AQU for Aquarius, and PIS for Pisces. PIS. And so what you have to do essentially is, interesting thing about PIS. This is a fascinating day. We're talking about all the body humors. Do you know that in the 17th century, astrologers were called piss prophets? We were called piss prophets. Do you know why? Because in medical astrology, one of the ways of casting a medical astrology chart was to cast the chart for when you receive the urine of the sick person. people would bring you the urine of the sick person and say, hey, this person is sick, cast a chart, tell me if they'll live or die. And so you had a house full of piss, all these tiny vials of piss on your windowsill. And so we were called the piss prophets. I don't mind being called a piss prophet if I'm good at it. We were called the piss prophets. Oh my God. Okay. Let's stay focused, team. Oh, like in Chinese medicine, they know that. Aries, what about it? So, what I want you all to know today, because astrologers tend to not know this, what I need for you all to know is that the word triplicity corresponds with the elements. Let's put this up here. Triplicity. The word triplicity emphatically corresponds with the elements. It is that important. So when we talk about fire, air, water, earth, we're talking about triplicity. I've seen astrologers, big professional astrologers, more famous than I'll probably ever be in this lifetime, go on stage and talk about triplicity, talking about cardinal, fixed, and mutable, and not knowing the difference between triplicity and quadruplicity. You must. Whether you choose to study with me, whether you hate this class and you hate me after today because it's not what you thought it was supposed to be, you need to know as a fact of life that triplicity corresponds with the word element. Triplicity equals element. Okay? I'm going on a trip to Elementata. If it goes, triplicity corresponds with the elements. Going on a trip, gonna sing Hakuna Matata. I'm going to see my fellow Elementata. That is how you remember them. Okay. Triplicity element. So Aries is of the fiery triplicity. Leo is of the fiery triplicity. Sagittarius is of the fiery triplicity. Taurus is of the earthy triplicity. Virgo is of the earthy triplicity. Capricorn is of the earthy triplicity. Gemini is of the airy triplicity. Libra is of the airy triplicity. Aquarius is of the airy triplicity. Cancer is of the watery triplicity. Scorpio is of the watery triplicity. Pisces is of the watery triplicity. Aries is of the fiery triplicity, meaning that it is a hot and dry choleric sign. Taurus is of the earthy triplicity, meaning it is a cold and dry melancholic sign. Gemini is of the airy triplicity, meaning it is a hot and wet sanguine sign. Cancer is of the watery triplicity, meaning it is of a cold and wet phlegmatic sign. Leo is of the fiery triplicity, meaning it is a hot and wet, oy Dios mío, hot and dry choleric sign. Virgo is of the earthy triplicity, meaning it is a cold and dry melancholic sign. Libra is of the airy triplicity, meaning it is a hot and wet sanguine sign. Scorpio is of the watery triplicity, is a cold and wet, phlegmatic sign. Sagittarius is of the fiery triplicity, it is a hot and dry. Hot and dry, what is the other word that I'm looking for? Hot and dry, choleric sign. Capricorn is of the earthy triplicity, meaning there's a cold and dry, melancholic sign. Aquarius is of the airy triplicity, meaning it is a what? All meaning it is a hot and wet, sanguine sign. And finally, we have Pisces of the watery triplicity, meaning it is a cold and wet, phlegmatic sign. Okay? So the 12 signs of the zodiac. If it is also helpful to you, you should also use the word triplicity. Every time you talk about the signs, say it is of the fiery triplicity so that your mind can create an emphatic connection between the word triplicity and the element. Yes? Okay, 1 second. Just because I need Andre Gias, are you here?
Yes.
Andre, do me a favor and send the Stellarium link to, wet and moist are the same, Anthony. Send a link to tell the people in the PCA1 group chat that we're here in the Stellarium. Because I think that they got another link yesterday for PCA2 and they need to know to come here instead. Okay, people, I'm aware that we started a little bit later than intended, so I would like to give you that time back. Is that okay with you? Can I give you that time back? We started at, I think, 1:50, 11:50. We should have started at 11:30, and so I want to give you that time back. And once again, my apologies. This isn't like me at all, and I had high hopes for today, and when you hope too high, you end up with black bile in your mouth. Okay, let's move on. I'm happy that you all got that joke. Okay, let's go. So now we've divided the signs of the zodiac into their appropriate triplicities. The next thing that we should talk about is this notion of gender within traditional astrology, because gender has always been a part of traditional astrology because that is a fundamental way in which the ancients divided our relationship to the world around us. So 2 genders. So Ptolemy tells us that everything astrologically is divided into masculine and feminine. And so this applies to the 4 elements. So we have the masculine elements, which are going to be fire and air. Anything that looks like a penis is going to be masculine. What do I mean by that? We have the triangles that represent the elements. This is another way how you get your mind to make a connection between triplicity and element, because the elements are all represented by a triangle, yes? So this is the fire triangle. This is the water triangle. So in your mind, you already have this connection between the word triplicity and element, because we don't have a fire square or a fire whatever. We have a fire triangle. We have a water triangle. So this is the fire triangle. This is the water triangle. And then we have the air triangle. And we have finally the earth triangle. If it looks like a penis, it's masculine. If it looks like a vagina, it's feminine. And if you're here in this class, there's a high probability that you watched the Da Vinci Code growing up. And so, having watched the Da Vinci Code, you remember that scene where Professor Gandalf, whatever his name is, he did the whole thing with the triangle and the situation. And from that day forward, you never look at a triangle the same again in your life. So we have the upward pointing phallic triangles are representing the masculine elements. So that's going to be fire and air. And the downward pointing chalice ones are going to be representing the feminine elements. And notice that even when you look at this, you could tell that fire and water were the original pure elements. And then, because fire and water are just pure triangles, and earth and air have this additional break or this additional line. So everything boils down to fire and water to a very large degree, because truthfully, metaphysically, everything boils down to the sun and the moon. And that's another story for another day. Maybe the day is tomorrow. But where are we? We're going to scroll back up to this one and say, what are we saying? So masculine elements of fire and air, and then the feminine elements are water and earth. Yes? So that's my 4 elements, and that's how they're divided. Then my planets are also going to be divided into masculine and feminine. The 7 planets. Masculine planets are going to be Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun. Feminine planets are Venus and the Moon. Mercury is a hermaphrodite. Hermaphrodite comes from Hermes and Aphrodite. Hermaphrodite, that's where we get the word hermaphrodite, Hermes and Aphrodite, which is interesting because Mercury is Hermes. But in the word hermaphrodite, we see this joining of the male and the female into one. So even though we consider Mercury to be a hermaphrodite and Hermes to be a hermaphrodite, even within the word hermaphrodite, the herm is meant to symbolize the masculine part of that. And the Aphrodite as an Aphrodite is meant to symbolize the feminine part of that. So Mercury is a hermaphrodite, but we tend to consider Mercury to be, when we refer to Mercury, we tend to say him or we tend to say he, because Mercury has historically been symbolized. If you look at pictures of Mercury, he's a very sexy, naked man with wings on his head and wings on his feet. Mercury. So, but Mercury is a hermaphrodite. Mercury is both, having the ability to be masculine and feminine. And in particular, Mercury is thought to be masculine when he is with masculine planets and feminine when he is with feminine planets. So we have the 7 planets, and now the 12 signs of the Zodiac would give us what? We have the fire signs and the air signs are masculine. Fire signs and air signs are masculine. That's Aries, Gemini, Leo, Libra, Sagittarius, and Aquarius. And then the feminines, the earth and water signs are feminine. And that's going to be which signs? That's going to be my Taurus, Cancer, Virgo, Scorpio, Capricorn, and Pisces. Okay, so those are my feminine signs. So these are the masculine signs, these are the feminine signs. For the people who are joining in for PCA2, we're going to step into a medical astrology discussion within this focal class, and that's where we're going to be starting your class. We started 20 minutes late today, Foca, because of some mix-up with the Zoom link. And I think there might still be a mix-up with the Zoom link in the background, truth be told. Where's my cell phone? I need to let Natalia those know to email. I don't even know what to let her know at this point because today has been such a crazy day. Let me just check and see if anybody is okay. So now we're going to move on and talk about a piece that is important or pertinent to us from a medical astrology perspective with these signs of the zodiac. Within traditional astrology, these signs are also going to be corresponding with various regions of the physical body. And in general, we all should just know what those regions are in a broad sense. So let me just make sure we did what we're supposed to. We did the 2 genders, we did the 4 elements, we did the 7 planets, we did the 12 signs of the zodiac. Now, our final major piece for today, before we switch gears and before I tell you TTYL, is that melothesia. There should be a heading, melothesia. Melothesia refers to assigning astral correspondences to the various regions and organs of the human body. So within this, we have Aries, which we abbreviate by ARI, corresponding with the head and everything within it. And I'm just going to do this very basic because we don't need to go much more than basic for the purposes of what we're doing. So Aries corresponding with the head and everything within it. Taurus, TAU, corresponding with the neck as a region and the throat, which, I mean, there's a lot going on in the neck and the throat, but we're just going to leave it there. Aries, Taurus, Gemini, corresponding with the arms and the hands. With the arms and the hands. We could even go a little bit further and say Gemini corresponding with the lungs, the arms, and the hands. Okay. Aries, Taurus, Gemini. Cancer corresponding with the stomach, with the breasts and the stomach. Breast and stomach. So those of you who are here for the medical astrology class, which starts after this, I'm using this end of Foca as the beginning of your class, essentially, so that we could, keep things on track. So Aries corresponding with the head, Taurus corresponding with the neck and the throat, Gemini corresponding with the lungs, the arms, and the hands, Cancer corresponding with the breasts and the stomach. The next one is Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer. Leo is corresponding with the heart and spine. Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer. Leo. Virgo is corresponding. I'm going to go off the beaten track with this for a bit and just include what we know it to correspond with at Oraculos. Virgo is corresponding with the pancreas, the liver. So that's the off the beaten track part. Because usually what we read is that Virgo is corresponding with the small intestines, Okay. Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra is corresponding with, LIB is corresponding with brain, do things, with the kidneys, the ureters. In our bodies, where did I put that visible body? I think I closed it. In our bodies, we have our kidneys. We have our kidneys, and the right kidney is a little bit lower than the left kidney. We have our kidneys, and then out of the kidneys, we have tubes that run down towards our bladder. And these tubes, the only thing they do is they carry urine from our kidneys to our bladder. And those tubes are called ureters. Ureters. And then the tube that goes from our bladder out of our body for the urine is going to be called the urethra. So these are the ureters. Ureters are tubes that carry the urine from the kidneys to the bladder. All right, so the kidneys are corresponding with the Libra is corresponding with the kidneys and the ureters, but it's also corresponding with the lower back in general. Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, SCO is corresponding with the bowel, the bladder. Well, let me do this differently. Bladder, bowels, rectum, anus, and it's also corresponding with the pudenda, which is a word I love, which is your external genitals. The pudenda. Scorpio, Sagittarius is corresponding with the hips and thighs. Hips and thighs. Sorry, Marlena, go for it. Capricorn is corresponding with the knees. Aquarius is corresponding with the legs. There's a difference between your thigh and your leg. Your thigh is the upper portion, and it's separated by the knee, and then beneath your knee is your leg, and then that's your foot. So this is your thigh, this is your leg. The whole thing is not called leg. In the same way as you have an arm and you have a forearm, and the whole thing isn't called arm, even though we tend to call the whole thing arm in English, you have a thigh and you have a leg. So the legs, viz, because people still are not going to know what it means, viz, we're referring to the shins and the ankles. The reason why your ankles fall under the dominion of Aquarius and not Pisces is because your ankles are not a separate body part other than your shins. The ankles are the end of your shin bones, basically. So your ankles are not a part of your feet. Your feet are separate from your ankles. So Aquarius is the shins and the ankles. And then finally, Pisces, is representing the feet. This is a very idiot's guide to melothesia sort of situation, but it's a very good starting point for you, especially if you all have medical astrology aspirations in the future. This is the base. And today, what we've established in this class is really the baseline of everything. Okay? So how many pages do we have? This is so said, so done. We have 5 pages within our working document. And so these 5 pages represent what I would teach on day 1 of teaching people to become an astrologer. And that day 1 tends to shift every now and again, because day 1 for me 10 years ago is very different day 1 for me today. But at the end of the day, all of this represents foundational information that really sets you up to have a great deal of success as an astrologer, but it also fills the void of you knowing where and how these things originated, which is fundamentally what we want to be able to do. We want to know what it is, who came up with it, why they came up with it, what they thought about it. And so that's what we've established today. So between today and tomorrow, I know that you may not have that much time to review anything, but if you can review the working document, it will be to your best interest to do so. Okay? So thank you all so much for showing up today. I really sincerely appreciate all of you being here. Can we get the updated document? Did I not? Okay, let me send it. I mean, it's updating in real time. Hold on. Let me just copy the link. Share, copy the link. Anybody with the link? All right, I'm going to put it back in the chat. Okay, chat. There we go. So that's the link. Thank you all for showing up. I know that my voice isn't its normal lustriousness, but I did my best and I hope that it was good. And thank you all for coming and listening and tuning in. I really, really appreciate you being here. And I really hope that you come back tomorrow, especially those of you who are registered. I mean, for sure, come back tomorrow. And those of you who aren't registered and you're just doing the weekend when we need to register, no, because I'm going to go and share my thoughts with my Oraculos team, Erica, and I'm going to let them know how I feel about today. And we're more than likely going to we're using this exact same link. This Stellarium link is the great equalizer. Save it. I'm going to make sure that they email this link to you all as well. This link that we're in right now is called Stellarium. This will be the link that we join in tomorrow to save us all confusion. Okay? This Stellarium link. All right. So have a wonderful day, everyone. I sincerely hope that you come back tomorrow. And if you haven't already registered for the course and you really enjoy today, well, you'll really enjoy 14 weeks of this. So please, I would love for you to join us as we go through this journey, and it will definitely be worth your time and your effort. So have a wonderful day in the universe. TTYL. So someone's asking the time tomorrow. I'm going to tell you right now. I get an alert on my phone an hour before. So I just show up when I'm told to show up. But yes, tomorrow at 12:30. Okay? Tomorrow at 12:30. TTYL, everybody. See you all tomorrow. I love you all so much. Bye. People for PCA2, medical astrology, let's leave and come back. Okay? Bye.